Today we're talking about the best new or changed items for warriors in Season 4. We've covered every other role at this point, so this is the last one that's left. Quite a few things will be repetitions from the hunters and from the assassins because of the overlap between the physical items. In those cases I will skim over them a little bit quicker and put some more time into those items we haven't talked about yet. So for warriors, the starter items remain mostly the same. Bluestone Pendant was slightly changed, cost 800 gold, 15 physical power, 50 mana, 5 MP5 and 30 damage over 2 seconds, stacking up to 2 times. This item is still good for those who lack early clear, early aggression and can compensate for it that way. It is not necessarily the best item for trades at the moment, because for that there is Death Toll. Death Toll comes in at 800 gold, 10 physical power, 100 health, and it has increased healing and mana regeneration from its passive as compared to in the previous season. It now gives 8 health and 3 mana per basic hit on an enemy target. So as such, Death Toll even a little stronger here, and especially for solo lane this will be impactful. So I think we'll see a lot of Death Toll, especially on those where it was previously a little unclear which one you're gonna go for. We're coming back to the starters a little later. For now, let's look at the other new or changed items. Gladiators Shield is the first new item. It costs 1700 gold, it has 15 physical power, 40 physical protections, 10% cooldown reduction, and a very unique passive. Anytime you hit an enemy god with an ability, you're healed for 2% of your max health and mana. This only procs once per ability. It is very interesting because this is some little extra sustain that you can make use of in lane, and the stats of the item are kinda good-ish. It doesn't give you the same defense and CDR as, for example, Respite of Valor, but the item is also cheaper, so it's a bit of a bridge item if you're looking for some very aggressive early plays and think you can get away with a little less protections, a little less CDR, and you're really looking to bully the enemy lane. I wouldn't say this is mandatory on everyone, but on those where you think you can get away with that aggression, maybe in combination with a Death Toll for even more sustain, this can be good. Due to its cheap price, it also allows you to go into more specific counter items early on as opposed to the more expensive physical defense items. The next item is Ancilla. I've talked about this when it came to the assassins already. 25 physical power, 60 magical protection, 10% CDR, and the passive, which silences enemies after getting hit by a magical ability, now procs every 30 seconds instead of every 60 seconds. As Ancilla only costs 2000 gold, I think it's very much worth considering even for warriors now. It still has great stats overall, it has a lot of protection for the price and has CDR and some power and a very interesting passive that counters specific gods very well. The next item is a Black Thorn Hammer. Black Thorn Hammer costs 2300 gold, has 30 physical power, 200 health and 200 mana. The passive is, if you are reduced to below 30% HP, all of your cooldowns are reduced by 3 seconds and all of your ability costs 0 mana for the next 5 seconds. This effect can only be activated once every 60 seconds. Now, if you look at the stats of this item without anything else, it's actually not that great. 30 power is not that great, 200 health for that gold is not that great, and the mana, well, I don't really think flat mana is all too worthy on most warriors. The reason why this item is so good, or why I think this item is relatively good, is because it synergizes so well with Mantle of Discord. This item allows you to get out of problematic situations, and it gives you health. Mantle of Discord basically has the other part of that passive with the CC immunity and the CC, which will mean if you have this and Mantle of Discord, you are so likely to get out of a bad situation the moment you hit 30% health, because everyone around is gonna get stunned, you get out for free in terms of CC immunity, you have all your abilities, and they cost no mana, so there's nothing that can really happen to you. I don't think it's on the same level as Mantle of Discord, but I think it is very much worth in combination with Mantle of Discord. Maybe as a secondary item after, despite of being cheaper, but maybe also beforehand if you can afford to get away with an item that doesn't have the craziest stats otherwise. The next item is Witchblade. Witchblade was changed, it now costs 2050 gold, has 200 health, no longer physical protection, 15% attack speed, 10% movement speed, and an aura that reduces the attack speed of enemies within 55 units by 20%. Also a passive that whenever you hit an enemy with a basic attack, they get a 15% healing reduction, which can stack up to 3 times. So this means 45% healing reduction if you hit the enemy a few times, and the item still has health, it has movement speed again, from way back in the old seasons. It has some attack speed, and it has the attack speed reduction. It's a bit of a weird mix, but I think those warriors who can make use of attack speed in general will be able to make use of this item now. When put in comparison with, for example, Blackthorn Hammer, then the item is also very cheap for what it offers, so maybe Blackthorn Hammer should just get a price decrease. The next item is Spectral Armor. We talked about this in the Guardian section before. 2100 gold, 70 physical protection, 300 mana, 10 MP5, 20% CCR crowd control reduction, and whenever you receive physical damage from a guard, enemies within 30 units of you are feared for 1 second, 90-second cooldown. Extremely strong item, really cheap price. There's not much more to say about it. It's just a great pickup. The only thing that it lacks is cooldown reduction basically, and otherwise it has everything that you want. It's such a strong passive, and yeah, well, there's not much of a reason not to build it as long as there's anyone who would get into melee range of you in order to trigger the passive. Similarly, we have talked about Stone of Gaia with the Assassins before. Stone of Gaia, 2000 gold, 400 health, 25 HP5, 15 MP5, and when you're hit by a knockup or knockback, you get enveloped by the earth, becoming CC immune for 1 second, which can only occur once every 90 seconds, and it also regenerates 2% of your max health every 5 seconds. Even better for warriors than it is for assassins, also great for guardians by the way. And it's a great item overall as long as there's anyone on the enemy team with knockup that would greatly benefit from knocking you up, CCing you out of something where you would be relevant in a teamfight, for example. And on top of that, you get the regeneration, which also means that this item is not a bad choice in lane. If you get like one defensive item and your next item is Stone of Gaia, that will very much counter, for example, a Tyr. So this is just a great choice overall for warriors, and there are many reasons to pick it up. Once again, what it lacks is more on the side of the aggression in regards to, for example, a cooldown reduction or something like that. It doesn't have any of that. It's purely defensive stats. As for the rituals, I will mention 2. Frenzied Ritual, which is basically Old Frenzy put into a ritual and buffed a little bit. 55 units within the user, everyone gets a buff that gives them 25% extra damage output and 20% attack speed for 10 seconds. Very, very strong, and I think that warriors should be the one, along with the guardians, or the supports rather, who should be looking to pick up a Frenzied Ritual in order to help their team. The other one is Rallying Ritual, basically just extending the teleport here. It's just teleport to guards basically, and I think it's also going to be very strong on warriors as anyone else really. They don't really need, for example, the Combat Blink Relic as much, though this one will maybe help more in order to close out a fight, turn the fight around, make it a more helpful situation for your team overall. So, both great rituals in my opinion. And with that, we're coming to the question marks, the ones where I'm not quite sure how good they will be, and where there is a reason to not put them in the best items right away. The first one here is Swift Wing, also a starter item. Cost 800 gold, 100 health, 10 HP5, 5% movement speed. Whenever you leave the fountain, you gain 40% movement speed for 15 seconds. So overall, this item doesn't really have the same aggression as most other starters, but it still allows you to sustain in lane a fair bit. The problem that I think will occur here for warriors in the solo lane is you can have this, but you kind of still want teleport. Teleport is just kind of mandatory for many teams because it can turn around teamfights so well, and also because it is what prevents enemies from split pushing. So you almost always want at least one teleport on the team, and the solo laner is just typically the one to get it. There's just no other role that has an easy time defending a tower while also having a relic slot left that they could use for it. As such, this just often comes down to the solo laner, which is often a warrior, and I don't really see how Swift Wing could replace that, because you're not going to be able to rush to a tower in that time. So while it may work if the enemy already pushed up a few towers and you just kind of come in from base then, I still think teleport is somewhat more important. Whereas getting Swift Wing early would allow you to aggress better on the enemy by getting, for example, a Sunder or something like that. But is it going to be worth it in the end? I'm not sure. It's something you could consider against comps that really don't have any split push potential, for example, if they have a Freya ADC or something like that, but those are very, very rare. Usually you have at least 1 or 2 characters on the enemy team who can split push, and in that moment you're kinda obliged to get teleport already. The next one is War Flag. War Flag costs 800 gold, has 10 physical power, 100 health, 5 MP5, and the passive is being in range of a minion or jungle camp death without dealing the killing blow, restores 5 health and 5 mana to allies within 55 units, and also provides you and your allies with a stacking buff of 1% movement speed and 1% attack speed that lasts 6 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. Well, that's one hell of a passive. Now this is not a solo lane item, that's obvious. This is a support warrior item, and you can only build on warriors because of the physical power. I do not see how it will be able to replace watchers because of the bonus gold, and that's just a little too important, but it could be an interesting secondary starter that you use along with it. As such, I wouldn't rule it out completely, but I'm not too sure how well it will perform. The next question mark is Chalice of Healing. So I do not think that any other role could make use of this really but solo lane. In solo lane you will just look for some sort of sustain early, and if you have a character that doesn't have much natural sustain, then maybe Chalice of Healing could help. The problem with Chalice of Healing is that it only holds 3 charges, as opposed to if you were to buy 5 pots, 5 healing pots. So while you're saving some gold because of the relatively cheap cost of 300 gold, it is still in a little bit of an awkward place. I do not think that it will be able to replace health pots so far, because often enough you will not need more than those starter health pots, but you will need more than 3 health pots at the start. But if it's able to, then this could be an interesting choice simply due to the much lower pricing. The last item is Soul Eater. A Soul Eater costs 2200 gold, it has 20% lifesteal, 200 mana, 20% CCR, and the passive is hitting enemy gods with a basic attack heals you for 2% of your maximum health per hit. The awkward thing with this item is that it doesn't really provide you with any sort of defensive stats aside of lifesteal. It also requires you to have some attack speed in order to actually be really worth it, and that's all coming together kind of oddly. First of all, lifesteal as a stat on solo lane is just mostly isn't necessary and doesn't work all too well. The mana is not important. CCR is nice, but it's not worth that much gold. So really, what you're buying this for in the end is the passive, and the passive alone just doesn't do as much as it maybe sounds in the beginning. Yes, you have more health, so you heal more, but you're not gonna run around a teamfight slapping people down forever. It does double proc on Erlang Shen, and as such, with a more aggressive build, he can maybe make use of it. But I feel like generally this item seems to be a little overwhelmed, you know. With it, when it still had 3% healing on PTS, it was definitely better. But now I think it's not that much of a warrior item as many people think it is. Most of the time, you get shut down for continuously trying to slap somebody down. And when you do, then, well, rip the passive. If you get CC'd, then rip the passive. So we'll see if somebody finds a way to really make use of it. So far, I'm not completely convinced. And that's it for this video. These are all the items that I think are worthy of being put in here. Thank you guys for watching. If you're interested, I'll be streaming on Twitch right now when this video goes up. So feel free to stop by. Link is at the end of the video. Duke Sloth, out.